Coming up, double standards. The Home Secretary's attack on police ahead of Saturday's protest march in London. Suella Braverman accused the Met of playing favourites with pro-Palestinian protesters, showing her frustration at Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley for not banning the event on Armistice Day. We'll get the reaction of a former Chief Inspector of Constabulary, and we'll find out what the public thinks about this weekend's march. Also tonight, a culture of abuse at British drama schools. We have a special report for you on the dream that became a nightmare for aspiring actors at some of the country's most prestigious colleges. NHS waiting lists hit a record high again. Bad news for patients and for the Prime Minister, who promised to cut the numbers. Plus, racing into the studio tonight, quite literally, GB para-athlete Johnny Huntington. He'll be joining us straight from the finish line of an epic run to tell us about his next challenge. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. Well, there are growing questions over the future of the Home Secretary tonight. This is after she accused the police of bias over their handling of pro-Palestinian protests. Suella Braverman wrote an article for The Times, which wasn't signed off by Number 10. In it, she suggested the Metropolitan Police place favourites. The Home Secretary has repeatedly called for the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, to ban a march on Saturday, Armistice Day. But the Commissioner insists that there is no intelligence to warrant a ban. A number of Conservatives have distanced themselves from Ms Braverman today. Labour has described her as out of control. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has the story.
Integrity, professionalism, accountability. Rishi Sunak's promise to us when he became PM. The woman by his side making that a very hard pledge to keep. Another Suella Braverman blow-up today after the Home Secretary went rogue and criticised the police's handling of pro-Palestinian protests in direct defiance of her PM. Accusing the police of playing favourites when it comes to protesters, these incendiary remarks, the latest in a rich back catalogue.
The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion.
There's only one way to describe those marches. They are hate marches. Living in a tent has become a lifestyle choice.
Despite all of the controversy over the past year, this beacon of the party's right still in post because the PM's too weak to sack her, says Keir Starmer.
The question really is for the Prime Minister. He's got a Home Secretary who's out of control and he is too weak to do anything about it.
But it's not just Labour criticising the Home Secretary's remarks. One former Cabinet Minister told me if she's trying to get sacked, I hope she succeeds. She's the first Home Secretary to contribute to public disorder. Another said, words fail me, just beyond words and decency. And finally, a senior Tory source simply said, it's effing insane. This former minister hinting she has to go. Do you think that the Home Secretary is being disloyal to the Prime Minister?
I'm sure the Prime Minister will show the required leadership to get us through this weekend, domestically, internationally and politically.
When you say the required leadership, do you think he should sack his Home Secretary?
I think that's a judgment to be made for the Prime Minister himself. Too frequently, I'm afraid, we've taken our eye off the ball because of choice words from the Home Secretary.
The Prime Minister's in an impossible position. If he doesn't sack Suella Braverman, he looks weak, and if he does, he risks a revolt from her supporters. Now, her backers tell me that you can't fire somebody in a row over words and that she hasn't actually broken any rules. So whether she stays or whether she goes comes down to a purely political judgment. And this is a Prime Minister that doesn't much like having to make those. Number 10 says the Prime Minister has full confidence in Suella Braverman, but in this building his team are fuming that she's undermining their man. And tonight they're working out how they reprimand a Home Secretary he's spent the past year trying to find ways not to sack. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's bring in Sky Shimant Freeman-Powell, who is outside New Scotland Yard in central London for us tonight. And Shimant, so much has been said about the police today, but what are the Met saying tonight, if anything?
Well, the Met have so far remained silent on this issue. It could be that they'd rather not engage in this tit for tat and instead focus on policing the events this Saturday, as of course we're predicting to see tens of thousands of people potentially marching on the capital, calling for a ceasefire, as they have done for weeks now, ever since the initial attack on the 7th of October. So far, the police haven't made any official statements, but the Home Secretary has. She's continued to make controversial statements, labelling them as hate marchers. But interestingly, Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, another one of Sir Mark Rowley's political overseers, backed him earlier on today. He said that he has faith that Sir Mark Rowley can police the events this weekend, and reiterated what Sir Mark Rowley had said about the fact that as it stands, intelligence doesn't call for a ban, because that ban under Section 13 of the Public Order Act would need to have intelligence which proved that there was a significant threat of serious public disorder. And as it stands, Sir Mark Rowley had previously said the intelligence does not meet that threshold. It will be interesting to see, though, whether or not it would change the way that this planned protest is policed this Saturday. We have heard from the Met Police that so far, since the attack on the 7th of October, they've made a total of 188 arrests involving hate crimes, or they say linked to protests in London. And earlier this afternoon, they also confirmed that they have secured charges against 3 people for offences linked to protests or incidents of hate crimes. So all eyes are on Saturday to see how these protests will be policed and whether or not it differs from some of the protests we've seen previously, because as we know, whatever happens, it is Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Met, that will be held accountable.
Shimant, thank you. Well, tonight, the White House have announced that Israel has agreed to daily 4-hour humanitarian pauses in northern Gaza. This is to allow civilians to flee. However, the Israeli military was keen to stress that no ceasefire has been agreed. Let's head to Washington. Now, US correspondent James Matthews is there for us. And James, this isn't a ceasefire. It is a number of daily pauses. In practical terms, what does this look like?
In practical terms, it looks like 4-hour pauses with 3 hours notice. That's what the Americans are saying. But, you know, Sarah-Jane, we'll see how this announcement plays out. The White House made this announcement via their national security spokesman this morning, talking about significant steps towards these mini ceasefires of 4 hours at a time. Sky News asked a member, a colonel from the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, about that shortly afterwards. The language he used was no shift, so the language isn't wholly consistent. I suppose time and experience will tell in the coming hours and days just what synchronicity there is between America and Israel on it. But essentially, on the face of it, there will be pauses to allow for humanitarian aid, to allow for residents to flee combat zones, and to raise the possibility of a breathing space in which hostages might be released. The Americans certainly have been keen to emphasise their role in this, talking about US discussions bearing fruit effectively, including a call between Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. Joe Biden was asked earlier today about the length of humanitarian pauses. He was talking about how he was after pauses of longer than 3 days. To get to 4 hours does break something of an impasse for him, an impasse that had come to humiliate Joe Biden, rather, on the diplomatic stage. So to shift Israel towards his way of thinking is a small shift, but certainly a small result. I think it's all reflective of Biden's difficulty, his difficulty and lack of ability to steer Israel's thinking and to shape the course of this conflict. We see that continuing in terms of the diverging views on what to do in Gaza in the longer term. There is agreement on a ceasefire, on no ceasefire. America saying that would be inappropriate at this stage. But there is blowback for Biden internationally and domestically. His Democrat Party, as well as society at large, is divided. It could hurt him in the year towards the next election. And, there is pressure clearly on him, given his performance so far, pressure for him to steer a course that is coherent through this chaos.
James, thank you. James Matthews with the update there from Washington. Moving on to an exclusive investigation now. And Sky News has heard from over 50 drama school students who allege experiences of misconduct and harassment in some of the industry's leading institutions. Former students say that their time at the schools left them feeling broken and humiliated. One school has now launched an internal investigation as a result of these allegations being brought to their attention. Just to warn you that the special report coming up from Ashna Hiranag contains contents that some viewers may find distressing.
They are where dreams of stardom become reality.
In Akprov, we do obviously singing, dancing, acting.
Britain's drama schools are elite and fiercely competitive, but student allegations of misconduct within them pervade through these prestigious walls.
I always felt unsafe, but I thought that was a good thing.
Holly, whose identity we've hidden, is a former acting student at the East 15 Drama School who has never forgotten an interactive sensory-based lesson set in an 18th century brothel.
We were blindfolded in this experience and guided by our fellow actors in the other cast. Our hands were placed on our breasts, bums and bulges. We then had two smells. The first smell, one of the guys in the group had masturbated into his boxers, and his boxers essentially were held to our noses and we were told to inhale.
A moment, she says, was degrading.
I was very taken aback by that shocking experience of having someone hold a cloth to my nose and tell me to breathe in and it being sperm. For the other smell, I had my head lowered into a bucket, which one of the guys in the group had vomited into.
Cruel and questionable teaching practices shared by performing arts student Hannah at another school, whose name we've also changed. She says one teacher had students performing deep tissue massages on each other.
He would say things like, try that harder, try that deeper, and he'd watch and just kind of like snigger to himself.
One former drama school principal says the vulnerability of students is being abused.
If you're in an acting class, you're talking, you're exploring life, you're exploring people. It just all spills out, creating very vulnerable adults.
And the risk is that that could be exploited?
The risk is that it is being exploited.
We've spoken to over 50 drama school students, past and present, from various schools, and all have shared similar trauma brought on by experiences of harassment and misconduct. Training is intrinsically linked with industry, and there is a perpetual fear of speaking out. And when careers are on the line, reporting anything negative can come with risk.
Formal complaints are dealt with internally, but Anne-Marie says independent oversight is necessary for the training industry to change.
I would want there to be something outside of all the established colleges, because by default, they're all getting investigated in-house. Well, there's going to be a vested interest in so many things other than the student.
We've spoken to many students and those in the industry as part of this investigation. A spokesperson from the University of Essex, which oversees East 15, says they have updated guidance on conduct and consent, which has been in place since 2021. In a statement, they told us, "We are appalled by the issues that have been raised, which do not reflect the values of our university and East 15. This case was not reported in 2014, but having had this brought to our attention, we are appointing an independent reviewer to complete a full investigation into these very serious allegations. We do not tolerate harassment and bullying of any kind. We actively encourage students to speak out if they have any issues and to report incidents." All of England's leading drama schools are overseen by the Office for Students. The independent regulator is currently seeking to address sexual misconduct in all higher education institutions. But campaigners say this industry needs specific guidance to pierce through this unique environment. Ashna Hiranag, Sky News.
Well, two former students at another school, the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, have won a legal fight against that college. This is after they accused staff of failing to properly investigate allegations of sexual assault. Sydney Fedder and Elise McCamish were targeted by a male classmate who stripped naked during an improv session and gave unwanted massages. Well, earlier I spoke to Sydney and asked her for her reaction to Ashna's report.
My heart just broke to hear that You know, as much as this industry and drama schools would like everyone to believe that things have changed and things have modernized and that they believe victims and that they care about their students, that's just not true. They still prioritize their reputations more than they will ever prioritize students' mental well-being, both while they're in university and once they've left university.
It's worth reminding people of your story, what happened to you and why you felt that it was important to hold the college and those who didn't help you and who perpetrated this against you to account.
I think something that latched on to me was this kind of feeling of misplaced responsibility. I felt like all of the responsibility was put on me emotionally to kind of work through what had happened and process things myself. And it was absolutely a re-traumatizing going through the trial and 5 years of it being dragged out.
You and Elise actually set a legal precedent in your case, the judge ruling that universities do have a duty of care to students to carry out reasonable investigations when they receive allegations of sexual assault from their students. I had to read that a couple of times because I couldn't quite believe that that wasn't already the case. You know, these are institutions with young people in them. You would imagine that they have a duty of care, responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is now a legal precedent that's been set because of what you went through.
I mean, before that, there was no legal precedent. So they were able and tried to argue in court that they had no legal reason to carry out a reasonable investigation into assault, that they had a legal duty of care to their staff, but not to their students. And you're sitting there thinking, well, we're the ones paying tuition to be there. We're essentially paying the salary of the teachers who are then enacting this terror on us and then able to investigate said terror. It's just a completely skewed power system, and they were able to exploit it to the furthest extent. And even though we won, I'm still dealing with the ramifications of the stress that my body was physically going through. Like, I didn't eat for the entire week leading up to trial, and I ended up having to seek help from a nutritionist to like reintroduce food into my body. And it was just due to the intense stress of the trial.
This was drawn out over 5 years, but you're still living with it now. We heard it in Ashna Hiranag's report there. Many of them, if they spoke to her and shared their experiences, didn't want to be named, didn't even want to go on the record in some cases, because they were worried about the consequences afterwards. And I'm not just talking about what you're going through, the physical and mental torture, but about the effect on your career.
Absolutely.
Because you felt that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely noticed a pattern in which the more my case started getting spoken about and the more I started speaking about it to journalists, the less auditions I would get through. And I remember there was like a week where I got to the second round of a really big audition and I lost it. And they said that there was no reason behind it, that it had nothing to do with my performance. It had nothing to do with the acting. That was also the same week that my story was announced through BBC Wales. And so, of course, you know, I'm an actor. I could be a bit like neurotic and think, you know, that there's something bigger behind this, but I can't help but notice those kinds of patterns.
Just finally, Sydney, disappointing that it's had to come to this, that there are more people out there that are going through what you went through. But what do you want to happen now that this story is back in the headlines? What do you want to happen from this point on?
I think there absolutely needs to be like a completely independent body to handle investigations of sexual assault and violence in higher education institutions, because it just does not make sense for these cases to be handled internally, especially when up until now there was no legal duty to have, say, proper training. So it came out in our trial that the head of safeguarding had no safeguarding training. And things like that were legal. So there needs to be some power removed from these institutions and put back into a third party that has simply the well-being and care of the students that are paying for these educations and paying for these services to be there. I don't know what else to say. I hope no one else has to go through this. I hope Royal Welsh has learned from their actions, and I hope that other schools will learn from their failures as well. But from what we've seen, I'm not hopeful.
Well, the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama has given us this statement in response to Sydney's story. The school have said nothing is more important to us than keeping our students safe. We are sorry that the women involved in this case were hurt by aspects of the way the college responded to their complaints. Since 2017, we have transformed how we respond to sensitive disclosures, how we deal with complaints or concerns, and how we support and safeguard our students. Let's bring in Ashna now. Ashna, some absolutely shocking stories being shared in your report by students who understandably didn't want to give their names or do this without anonymity. What's been the response to what we've seen on our screens tonight?
To give you an idea of how we've gotten to this point, myself and the producer, Luke Englin, who worked on this piece with me in this investigation, we've sent probably in excess of 300 messages over the past 7 months or so. And it was those three brave people that were comfortable enough to share their experiences on camera, albeit anonymously. Since this investigation has gone out today, we've received dozens more messages from people with personal experiences, people that have witnessed something inappropriate, experienced something that they have deemed to be harrowing in retrospect, but also, crucially, from students who are still within these 18 leading institutions. And it ultimately comes down to protection. You know, these schools, for people at home, to give a bit of context, these are schools which have the ability to launch glittering careers. Hopes and dreams are pinned on them. So when people are in them and within this kind of elite institution, it is so difficult to try and speak out. So it is a major concern for both students and parents too. If you're spending a huge amount of money to send your student there, the concern is, well, how are they being protected? And Sydney mentioned it there regarding regulation, and it's something Caroline Noakes, the chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee, has spoken about too.
We need to see better regulation. We need to see an understanding from this sort of educational institution that they have a responsibility to safeguard still relatively young people. They may be over 18, but they're still young. And also, we have to have cultural change. We cannot have a situation where, whether it's lecturers, whether it's fellow students, whether it's individuals themselves feeling that it's okay to touch people inappropriately, that it's okay to use language that is belittling and demeaning.
Since the Me Too movement in 2017, a lot of these schools have updated their sexual misconduct policy. Some of them have consent-based workshops. Some of them do bring in intimacy practitioners when it comes to the end-of-term show. But crucially, there is no comprehensive training in a lot of these schools, or the majority of these schools. It comes down to protection, it comes down to safety. But also, it is clear that from this piece going out, one school in particular is taking this particularly seriously, launching an internal investigation because of the allegations that have been brought to light. They've told me today they have implemented an independent reviewer to look into this, and they hope that process can get underway by the end of the week. OK,
Ashna, thank you. That report, I know you'll keep across developments in it and speak to us here on the UK Tonight as and when they occur. Thank you. Well, if you've had a similar experience and you would like to share your story with Ashna, there's a QR code on the screen now. So please feel confident enough to get in touch and tell us your story. Well, if this story has brought up any issues for you, there is help available. Samaritans is on 116123. You can email them, joe@samaritans.org. So to come on the UK Tonight, protesters scale the Scottish Parliament building to condemn the Israeli bombardment of Gaza. The father of Liverpool footballer Luis Diaz is released by kidnappers in Colombia, and details of Sir Bobby Charlton's funeral have been announced.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
Well, there's a real sense now that people are beginning to expect that this whole airlift is coming to an end, and they're really, really desperate. We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people and putting them into trucks.
You either live and recover, or you die.
OK, so that's like a war.
That's the war, yes.
We help you understand the world with us.
Over the past 24 hours, the soldiers have been attacked on a number of occasions. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change. We've been crushed.
To take you to the heart of stories that shape our world.
They were convinced the United States would become hooked. Well, they were right.
An enormous explosion has just come down. I think it was a monster that's just landed in between us.
The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world.
It's not out of control, but the tears were drawn so hot.
Welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Here's what's coming up. NHS waiting lists in England reach a new record high again. We'll have all the details with our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi. And I'm going to speak to the disabled athlete, Johnny Huntington, who, after running all the way from Manchester to London, now has his sights on the South Pole. But first, let's take a look at some of the other stories making news in the UK tonight. And the details of Sir Bobby Charlton's funeral have been announced by Manchester United. The service is going to be held at Manchester Cathedral on Monday, with up to 1,000 guests invited to celebrate his life. Fans and members of the public will be asked to pay their respects as his funeral cortege passes Old Trafford on its way to the cathedral. 5 people have been arrested after a group of pro-Palestinian protesters climbed the Scottish Parliament building. The group attached a Palestinian flag to the awning above the main entrance and a large sign which read, "Stop Arming Israel." Police Scotland closed off the area in front of the building and escorted the demonstrators from the roof at around 4 o'clock this afternoon. The father of Liverpool footballer Luis Diaz has been released by kidnappers in Colombia. Luis Manuel Diaz was abducted along with his wife by armed men on motorcycles almost 2 weeks ago, although she was freed just a few hours after she was taken. Well, it's been a long wait, and it's taken days of negotiation with a guerrilla group, the National Liberation Army, and the Colombian government, but Diaz's father has now been released. NatWest is set to scrap the bulk of a possible £10 million payout to its former chief executive, Dame Alison Rose. The former head of NatWest was at the centre of the debanking row sparked by the closure of Nigel Farage's Coutts account. Sky News has now learned that the NatWest board has decided not to pay most of this discretionary element of Dame Alison's pay package, although she is still expected to receive a seven-figure sum in the form of her basic salary and fixed share allowance. Now, reducing waiting lists for hospital treatment was one of the government's big pledges at the start of this year. However, figures out today show that waiting times have actually hit another record high in England. Sky's health correspondent Ashish Joshi has been taking a look at the numbers.
These kind folk, what they've done for me is unbelievable. And I mean that.
Graeme has been here before. After waiting 2 years for his first knee replacement, he's now waited almost a year for his second. A debilitating condition that has forced him to move home, and underlying health concerns only make his case more complex.
I think knee replacements and things like that, it's not life-threatening. It holds you back, but it's not life-threatening. I mean, I had a 5-heart bypass in 2005. I'm still here.
6.5 million people are waiting for elective care. That's an increase of 1.5 million in just 2 years. A list growing before the pandemic, only made longer by COVID and strikes by health workers.
Nationally, it's impacted for all of us. It is challenging, but we look at where here we work 6 days a week, so we offer theatres on a Saturday. So where possible, we're maximising that facility to make up for the time.
NHS England warns elective work like this will have to be scaled back due to costs associated with the strikes.
The talks between the BMA and the government are in their second week and they're being described as constructive. This is a real opportunity to bring this dispute to an end.
Pressures previously reserved for winter are being felt all year round as the health and care systems struggle with the demand of caring for an older, sicker population.
We're seeing an ongoing challenge trying to find capacity and supporting our frailer older patients at discharge with non-medical needs. That continues to be a challenge. And yes, you add industrial action into that, it becomes quite a challenging mix.
Not too bad. Efforts by hospitals to speed up their elective operations mean Graeme will only have to stay here for one night.
20 minutes on.
Yet, every month, the number of people waiting only increases. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in Berkshire.
So to come on the UK tonight, we'll get more on the Home Secretary's attack on the Metropolitan Police, the force already under pressure ahead of the pro-Palestinian march in London on Armistice Day. more now on the growing row over the pro-Palestinian march in central London on Saturday, which is, of course, Armistice Day. The Home Secretary has suggested police are playing favourites, treating this protest differently to how they would treat right-wing or nationalist demonstrations. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner says it's not up to him to decide what people are allowed to protest about or when they're allowed to do it. But what does the public think? Here's our data and forensics correspondent, Tom Cheshire.
This extraordinary row over the Home Secretary began with a simple question. Should the pro-Palestinian march this Saturday, which is Armistice Day, be allowed to happen? Well, the Home Secretary thinks the police should ban it. The police say there's no legal justification to do that. Well, we asked the public, do you think the protests should be allowed to go ahead or should they be banned? And this is what they said. Half of all Britons think Saturday's protests should be banned. It is a clear preference to the 34% who said they should be allowed to go ahead. That 50% basically agreeing with the Home Secretary's position, if not necessarily her rhetoric. Now, Britain feels a bit tense right now. If everything feels a bit divisive, it's because we are still very divided. This shows support for Israel and Palestine dating back to May, before the attacks. You can see what's happened since then. At that time, nearly half of people didn't know what they thought about the issue. Now, a third of people say they support both sides. But if you look at support for either Israel or Palestine, well, that hasn't really budged. It has fluctuated a little bit, but both sides have that core entrenched support. Speaking to that division, you can map it across age and political divides. It is there too. Conservative voters are more likely to support Israel. That's here in the blue than they are Palestine. But Labour voters beneath them, much more likely to support Palestine in the green. And same goes for age. The younger you are, the more you tend to support Palestine. So over here, up at the top, there's huge support for Palestine, very little for Israel in blue. You go older, you come down this, and it tends to go the other way round. So those divisions are there. And the public seem to be a bit further away from their political leaders' positions too. Both the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, support Israel's actions. But the public's preference here is for opposition to Israel's actions and a full ceasefire. So from the leadership to the public, the data shows that increasingly we are at odds with each other.
Well, regardless of what the public or the Home Secretary thinks, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police says he is upholding the law. So what kind of position has he been put in by Suella Braverman? Well, let's speak to policing commentator Graeme Webb, who joins me now. Graeme, good to see you. Thank you for joining us on the UK Tonight. Opinion shouldn't come into it. The Home Secretary, though, in her op-ed for The Times, suggesting otherwise, suggesting the police play favourites when it comes to protests. What did you think when you read that?
That's completely incorrect. Having policed many of these events, pro-Palestinian, right-wing, left-wing, you go across the whole political spectrum. There is nothing in the briefing, there's nothing in the intelligence. I used to write the reports and actually deliver the briefing. There is nothing in there that shows any favouritism on whatever event you're on. You police each event based on the risk and the threat from that event, and you police it accordingly as the event continues. There are some groups that actually react in a more confrontational manner when police turn up. There are others that are very, very peaceful. You police it according to the risk, not according to any political affiliation that group has.
The Times article openly critical of the police. There's been criticism of the Home Secretary's language over the last few days when talking about the police and the policing of this protest. She's been accused of compromising the operational independence of the police and also undermining public confidence in the police and the kind of decisions they have to make.
Yeah, I read the piece and I read what she had to say. I think she has actually. It's come at a really poor time, really, just before the weekend. I've spoken to officers who are due to work this weekend. They're now facing a more challenging day than they expected. I think her comments have just increased tension. It's raised emotions, more likely to get people turning up to counter this protest. The protest was agreed. If you listen to what the Met said on Monday, they actually asked the organisers to cancel it. The police didn't really want this to go ahead either. But there is no legal basis for them to actually ban it under the Public Order Act without getting technical. There is no legal basis. The Commissioner's absolutely correct in that he hasn't got the legal power at this stage to ask for a ban on it. They asked the organisers not to go ahead. They declined. So then the police have to work with the organisers. They've agreed a route that goes nowhere near Whitehall, nowhere near Westminster. So for the Home Secretary to then come out and make these comments, I think that's really poor judgment. And it's actually putting police officers at more risk of confrontation on Saturday. There's going to be more resources on this now. The Met have had to put even more officers on to safeguard Whitehall, to secure the actual march that's taking place. So that's more police officers taken away from frontline policing, because that's where you get your public order officers from. They would ordinarily be out protecting the public, answering 999 calls, but now on Saturday, they're going to be in central London dealing with these events.
Yeah. Do you think that this article and the comments and the build-up to this weekend from the Home Secretary has actually made it worse? Because, you know, this has worked up a whole head of steam. There's now the potential for this to be hijacked by groups, potentially with other motives. There could be breakaway groups. And as you said, what must the morale of police be like going into this weekend?
Well, they'll just, you know, police officers are mostly honest. They just go along and want to do an honest job. They want to just turn up, do their job, and like everybody else, go home at the end of it, but go home safely. Just turn up, do what's asked of them, and then go home. They'll turn up and do what's required of them on Saturday. They'll deal with what's in front of them. They'll follow their command team's desires. They'll listen to the briefing, the intelligence, and they'll police it accordingly. And they'll police whatever they face on the day. But this hasn't helped at all. And coming when it did, it was almost calming down slightly. I think people almost accepted what the Commissioner had said. There is no legal basis. Legal experts come out and supported his views on that. There isn't a legal basis for the police to actually ban it. So it's almost like we've got to get on with it. This actually has just caused even more, stirred it up again for me. So really poor timing, really poor judgment. I think it also questions again where the leadership is in government, really. What was this sanctioned? Was this known about? Was the actual content of the piece seen, viewed, approved, whatever? I think it's a really poorly worded article and comes at the wrong time.
OK, Graeme, thank you. And it's worth reiterating the Metropolitan Police today, in reaction to all of this, have said that they will be making no comment at this time. Graeme Webb, good to see you on the UK Tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, a British athlete who is aiming to become the first person with a disability to reach the South Pole unassisted says he wants to inspire others to dream big. He is Johnny Huntington. He was serving in the army when he suffered a stroke back in 2014. That left him paralysed from the neck down on his left side. Well, after 2.5 years of rehabilitation, he was able to walk again and emerge as one of Britain's leading paraskiers and endurance athletes. And to warm up for his South Pole Challenge, he's just run from Manchester to London, arriving at Tower Bridge earlier today. And I'm pleased to say he's come straight from the finish line to see us in the studio. Hello.
Hi there, Esther. Nice to see you.
Oh, nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Yeah, not too bad, actually. Yeah, like, genuinely, it's...
It may kick in tomorrow.
I have no doubt I'll feel terrible tomorrow, but still riding the high at the minute.
So you ran from Manchester to London, took you 11 days, and you have described this as a warm-up for what you're going to face in the South Pole, because nobody with a disability has done what you're planning to do in the South Pole. There's never been a challenge unassisted there. So talk me through the training if a casual 11-day run from Manchester to London is part of the prep.
Yeah, so it's kind of... it is pretty full on, I guess. It's lots of time spent doing like long-distance stuff, and one of the big problems I have is I've got to put on a load of weight as well, which I sort of don't do particularly easily. So, you know, sort of get home from this, eat loads for a month, you know.
I'm liking the sound of this part of the training, I must admit, especially getting into the winter period.
You know, some bits are a bit easier than others, yeah. So, but then I've got, 4 months in Sweden this winter. So sort of preparing, getting myself technically ready for everything to come, making sure that I'm sort of happily and confident in all the skills and drills that I need to sort of survive and not deteriorate when I'm down there. So it's, yeah. I
mean, you've just said something there, what I need to survive. Because, yes, this is a challenge. You are an experienced athlete. You've casually done an 11-day run. Survival is, part of the aim here in the South Pole, because the conditions there, I mean, they don't take any prisoners. It's really, really tough. So are you sort of a bit nervous about that? I know that you can do some tough things, but... Yeah, you'll be on your own, effectively.
Exactly, and for me, it's one of the things that I find really interesting about this challenge, because, you're not competing against anyone else. You're just against the environment you're in, and that's what's out to get you. And, we're really fortunate today, loads of really good technology, etc., to keep us warm, keep us safe. So from my point of view, if I do my job properly, I'll be absolutely fine. But I need to make sure that I'm proficient, trained well, competent, etc., to enable myself to do all of that. But there's nothing stopping me from doing that, I think.
And that's a big message you want to put out there, because, Johnny, you're not just doing this to test yourself, you're doing this to raise money for charities, but you're also doing it to show others what can be done, because obviously you had a stroke just after you'd got into Sandhurst, into the army, fit and healthy, and it happened in 2014, a gruelling 2 years to sort of get your life back to some kind of normality and function. What is the message you want to put out there to people who have found themselves in similar situations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest problems I had was that exactly like you said, I'd just commissioned into the army. I had literally, you know, that was step one of what I wanted to be doing. And I was really happy with it, etc. And at the point at which I got injured, it destroyed everything that I felt I'd worked for. And that was really hard for me. And I found it really difficult to figure out what it was that I wanted to do after that and what I felt I could do after that.
What life would look like.
Exactly. And I think that, for me, I think it's really easy to limit your own self-belief, not just around disability, but just in terms of what people are capable of. And I personally have enormous belief in people's ability to do stuff. But I think the first step of anyone being able to achieve anything is just having that spark of faith in themselves, that achieving that big thing is possible. And I just think it's really important. Like, nothing incredible would ever happen if people didn't believe that they could do stuff.
Yeah. OK, Johnny, really good to see you. Just remind people where they can donate to this cause and follow your training. Have you got a website up and running?
Yeah, absolutely. So best place to find me is on Instagram. All of my sort of...
It's where we find everyone these days, isn't
exactly.
it? Yeah.
All of my sort of...
What's your handle?
All my bimblings are there. I'm literally very unimaginative, at Johnny Huntington.
Brilliant. Make it nice and easy for people to find you. Well, Johnny, thank you. Good luck. We'll follow your progress.
Thanks very much.
Go and put your feet up. Relax, my word. Just run from Manchester to London and straight into the studio. That is some going. Well, if this story has brought up any issues for you, there is help, of course, at Samaritans 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. And we're going to bring you a bit more on the breaking news from earlier. NatWest set to scrap the bulk of a potential £10 million payout to its former chief executive. She is Dame Alison Rose. You may remember this story. The former head of NatWest was at the centre of the debanking row sparked by the closure of Nigel Farage's bank account at Coutts Bank, which is owned, of course, by NatWest. Well, Nigel Farage joins me now on the UK Tonight. Mr Farage, thank you for coming on to join us to react to this news. What are your thoughts initially?
Well, first things first, well done to Mark Kleiman from Sky News, who got this story. He seems to get all the good stories on banks. I think it's a very good piece of news. I mean, let's face it, Dame Alison Rose broke the most basic rules of the Financial Conduct Authority's rulebook on client confidentiality and several other matters too. The ICO were very clear that she was guilty of data breaches and then tried a half apology by saying, no, it wasn't really her, it was NatWest. But either way, you know, what she did was wrong in absolutely every regard. She also, of course, has been running a bank that we bailed out with tens of billions of pounds of taxpayers' money. We still own 40% of this bank as the taxpayer. The share price is collapsing. So she's done a bad job all round. And the thought she was going to walk away with 10 million quid having done this was outrageous. Now, as we understand it, we're going to get full details at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. She's still going to walk away with a seven-figure sum, so there's no need to feel sorry for her. But, you know, the idea that you reward failure, the idea that you reward somebody for breaking the rules, that would have been monstrous.
Yeah, it happens so often, though, doesn't it, when people walk away from companies after bad decisions are made. You know, this is something that is brought up quite a lot, but we are expecting more details tomorrow. Mark Kleiman, obviously, as you said, getting that scoop. Yeah. But at the time of this happening, the bank did apologise to you, acknowledging they had been guilty of serious failings in the way they had treated you. They debanked you. And this sparked something, didn't it? This sparked a big debate. What have you found since this happened to you in terms of this happening to other people? Is this a problem? What has this told us about the banking system and, high-profile individuals?
Well, the reason I went public was because I was sort of quietly talking to people whilst I was desperately scrabbling to find other banking arrangements. And I was discovering that actually a lot of people in public life had been debanked. So I thought, well, I'm going to stand up for them. And then as I dug deeper, I discovered lots of small businesses, especially those that deal in cash, had been debanked. And then, when we really got to the bottom of it, we discovered that 1 million bank accounts had been closed over the course of the last 5 years. My case was but just the tip of an enormous iceberg. And we have a massive problem in this country because if you lose your bank account, whether it's personal or business, you literally cannot function in modern society. You virtually become a non-person. And one of the very revealing internal emails at NatWest at a time, when I was struggling, but I'd gone public, one of the staff said, "Have we driven Farage out of the country?" And he sounded rather boastful about that, but that's the truth of it. So what I now want to do, and I've been fortunate in that Lloyds Bank have come to me and said, look, we will not debank people because of their political views. I would like to think that what has happened to Alison Rose ends the woke culture in banking, ends them playing politics and just dealing with customers on a commercial basis. But deeper than that, I think having a bank account is as essential as electricity and running water coming into your home. You simply can't exist today without it. And I think there needs to be a basic right for all of us to have a bank account for ourselves and for any legitimate business. And I would love to think that in the next general election, we're going to get Labour and Conservative promising that they will do this.
The City Watchdog has launched an urgent review of the practice across Britain's banking sector as a result of what your case sparked. How easy did you find it to get another bank account? I
was refused by 10 banks. I mean, I spent countless...
And what was the reason given for that?
High-profile individual, politically exposed person. The costs of compliance of the account would mean it's very difficult to make money. These were all the excuses that I was given. But I'm far from alone. I mean, we've even had instances where Nigel Lawson, who was Chancellor back in the 1980s, his granddaughter was refused an account because she was deemed to be a politically exposed person. This is a definition that we got from the European Union that we haven't bothered to amend. And there are 90,000 people in this country who are PEPs, politically exposed persons, many of whom struggle to get banking facilities, many of whom have had banking facilities closed down. I mean, that is a nonsense. So yes, this does affect high-profile people or relations of high-profile people, but equally, the ones that I really care about are the small, struggling businesses up and down this country. And what they've seen, by the end of this year, 3 out of 5 branch banks will have closed since 2016. So they struggle to get local banking facilities. And if they go in to pay their income in cash, the banks often don't want to accept it. And we have to find a way of making sure that the banking system is not just for the big corporate companies, but for all of us.
OK. Nigel Farage, thank you. Just quickly before you go, you have sorted your bank account out so you can, pay salaries and fees into there. Any chance that I'm a Celebrity fee is going to go into that bank account anytime soon?
Well, I tell you what, if I was to sign the contract and get the money that apparently has been offered to me, you never know, Coots might even have me back as a customer.
Nigel Farage, good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the UK Tonight. Right, David Garrido is here with the sport. Hi, David.
Hello. Yes, we're talking about England and the squad that's been named for their last 2 Euro qualifiers, already having made, of course, the next finals, which is in Germany, and that is coming up next June. The name that has been omitted from the squad for a 5th time in a row is Raheem Sterling. We're about to tell you more.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Now this might look like any old bus stop. in South London, and for most of us, that's exactly what it is. But for Isaac Chamberlain, this represents something much bigger, because this is the place where he decided to change his life forever.
Some of the stuff that I saw when I was growing up, a bit crazy. Gang violence, stabbings, you see police raids and all of that. If you're grown into it, you don't really, how can I say it? You don't really think it's anything crazy, do you know what I mean?
At what stage did your eyes become open to this as something that you actually might be involved in?
No, you don't really look at it like that. It's kind of like you're just having fun with your friends that you're growing up with. You start off obviously playing football together, and then everyone's together, and then you know, one person starts doing something and then everyone joins in, and then it's kind of like a clique of friends, then it turns into a gang, and it kind of goes that way. If you're from a certain area, everyone kind of knows everyone, do you know what I mean? Everyone's familiar with everyone, and they're like, hey, yo, little man, come over here, da, 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 da. How you doing, you right, whatever, whatever, and you see them with their chains and their money and stuff, and you're thinking, bro, I want to be like him.
Is that the appeal?
Of course. Like they have the money, have all the girls and all of that, and you're like, well, I want to be like them. They're the top guy.
So what were you doing?
Sell drugs or give this package to this person and come back with whatever they give you. Don't really look in the bag. But then obviously you start carrying knives, then you start, you know, holding things for people and all of that. And yeah, man, you just don't know how it could go. The rabbit hole gets real deep, man.
Was there a moment where you thought, this isn't something I want to do anymore?
Yeah, in one moment, obviously, it was near Knightsford Estate.
Take us back to that day. What were you doing?
Obviously, picked up some Class A drugs. We was on the bus. I think it was I don't know, 133 or 333. Maybe stopped on this exact bus stop. And then obviously we're coming out. We're thinking, yeah, job's done, whatever. We see a lot of police doing stops and searches right over there, and obviously my heart froze, so I was like, and then my friend is telling me, okay, look, do this, and I couldn't move, but then...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that's all from the UK tonight. You can catch up on the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen. You can share your thoughts with us there as well. We'll see you Monday at 8 o'clock.